Hi, this is Mike Cozono, staff backend engineer on the Geo team. I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of the POC for org data migration across GDK cells. So currently there is a one-liner. If you run this, it'll download the install script and run it, and it should start installing a GDK and everything. So this is the script, and to skip down to the overview of what it's going to do, it's going to install the initial GDK. It's using the word primary here. We are using Geo mostly as is currently, so there might be some Geo terminology sprinkled around in there. But it'll install an initial GDK, do some configuration, like for setting up Geo and stuff like that. Start it, create test data. So there will be a default organization, and it's going to add some, a project and, a merge request and an upload and things like that. But it will also create 2 more orgs and data in those orgs. And then it's going to configure a second cell. So the first one, this should say install legacy cell GDK or something like that. And this one will be the protocell or the target cell. And finally, it's going to run migration. So where migration is like do some more configuration on the cells, start replication, and then check that replication worked. So that's the quick overview. Let me show you the output here, kind of along with the overview. So phase 1, installing primary GDK. Phase 2, configuring primary as legacy cell. Phase 3, start primary and add license. Phase 4, create test data. Phase 5, configuring cell 2. Phase 6, running organization migration. Yeah, that's the last one. And if you just skip to the end, you can see it checked replication status a few times until, see, we just go back here. MR disks, external MR disks were not, there were 2 of them that were not replicated. And finally, at the end, there were 2 of them that are replicated, and the Git repos are replicated. Replication finished. We're not checking verification for now. That's not currently functional. So replication is complete, and that's it. Part of the idea is that we're going to be able to run a script like this in CI in its own job, just like the Geo install verification job and the verify cells job. So that's the super quick overview. I'm going to now get into the details, but so feel free to like skip around to details that you're interested in. I will maybe put timestamps in the description because, yeah, it's going to be a little dense from this point on. Okay, so validate inputs. The inputs that this script takes are listed at the top here. So if you're installing it from scratch, you have nothing in the directory that it's in. Make sure you stop any other GDKs so that there are no port conflicts. And then make sure you have something set that it will be able to set the license from. These are normal environment variables that regular GDK installations can use as well. It takes a GDK branch and a GitLab branch. That was necessary for the POC because it needs to, use all of the customized behavior. And I have it default to those currently, but that can be changed to main later and master. I probably should remove this because we should just do whatever the first org is that's created, but it accepts an org ID, which will be used in selective sync of orgs, working directory, the name of the initial GDK. The default's GDK because in CI we have an image that already has a GDK installed. And so if you call it the same thing, just GDK, then this install script will skip installing the first GDK because it already exists. So those are the inputs. Okay, install primary GDK. Trying to see if I did anything super special. Oh yeah. I'm going to try to get this merged as a separate feature. I already have an MR open for review, which probably has already been looked at. But when you do GDK install, you can specify a repo URL, but currently you can't specify a GitLab branch. So I added that so that it can install the desired branch directly rather than install master, install its dependencies, run migrations, and then you have to switch away from that to this branch, which is like a week and a half old, which makes this more reliable. So after install primary GDK, the configuration it's going to do is set some geo stuff. So this is a GDK only thing. This is not. So geo today, like everything needs to have a node name so that it knows which geo node it's a part of, which site it's a part of. So this one's called the legacy cell. We have, I turned on object storage to see replication work for that, which will use min.io and GDK. Reconfigure once, reconfigure twice, because during the first one, it usually fails with a race condition on some Postgres thing not being ready. Then we have restart Rails after the reconfigures. And that's it for configuring the primary. Start primary, check that it's running. Wait for it. And try to add a license, because Geo is premium and above. Phase 4, create test data. This is just like a one-off script for this thing. So it's kind of like not very elegant, but it works. It creates it creates data in the default org, and then it creates 2 more orgs with data. I don't think I really need to go too much into that. And then we have phase 5, configure and start cell 2. So fundamentally, this is mostly GDK cells up, but it also adds some configuration for this, org migration thing. So we're going to say the source cell is the one called legacy cell, and targets are protocell, and these are going to be the selective sync by organization IDs. This is going to cause this cell 2 to be named protocell for Geo. Wait for it to be ready, add a license. It's the database is separate from the legacy cell, so a lot of things you have to do twice. Okay, so finally here we come to the real meat of this whole thing. So load migration. The first step is basically to call GDK org configure-replication. And I'll get into that, but just to show you, then we call GDK org start-replication, and we check the replication status over and over. So when you call GDK org configure-replication, you reach this class, and it's going to forward those calls to org manager. And org manager, it does too much at the moment, but it orchestrates the process of moving organizations from one cell to another for the GDK org command. So configure replication does configure source cell and configure target cell. Right. Check the license, enable the feature file. This GeoNodes configurator, it doesn't do a ton, I don't think. Oh, it does. Okay, so it creates GeoNode records using Rails, so that I don't know, we can use some of its callbacks, and when we do configure source, it creates them in the source cell. Remember, the databases are separate. And then later, when we do configure target cell, it'll call this one, which will copy the rows from the source cell to the target cell. And so this method is a little messy, but that's it. It does what it says. It copies the rows from the source cell to the target cell. Okay, configure target cell. It needs to set up the geo-tracking database in the target cell. Copy the DB key base because that allows data that was encrypted in the source cell to be read and decrypted in the target cell. Yeah, copy GeoNodes table and restart Sidekick. All right, so that's it for configure replication. Then we have start replication. It's going to do copy org PG data, and I'll get into the specifics of that. It's going to configure selective sync, enable the GeoNodes because I think it created them disabled. This is something of a hack, I believe. Okay, so copy org PG data is implemented in this class. And the thing to know with this one is, like, you don't really have to know too much about this. Okay, the sequence ranges we can get into later, but the main thing to know about org PG data exporter is that it generates copy statements for every table based on the DB docs definitions. So, like if they have a sharding key defined, and it creates a whole list of here, okay, of copy commands, selecting the whole table, filtered by the org ID, or if the sharding key is namespace ID or project ID, then it will be filtered by those. Namespace ID in 9899, so there's two namespaces in that org. Project ID, there's one project with ID 20. Okay, so it makes a bunch of copy statements like that. Then, And here it uses this script to do so. So you can give it an organization ID or multiple IDs, and it will spit out those copy commands. And then all of that is given to this script, export org PG data. Given those copy statements in a file, it executes them optionally in parallel or sequentially. And for each one, it outputs a CSV file. If the CSV would have no rows, then it does not output a CSV file. And they're named like this. And all of those CSV files are given to import org PG data in the target cell. So it disables foreign key constraints for the session. So data can be imported in any order. It upserts, so you can run it more than once. Although if there was data that was deleted, you know, from the source, or you deleted a CSV or something, that's still going to exist because the upsert is not going to help you remove that. The input is the directory with all the CSV files, and it uses GDKP SQL to connect to the target cell's Postgres server. I think there's no parallel option on this one. I think because it was much faster, but I don't know if it might have been much faster because if you look at this, I think what's happening is when we execute all these copy statements, most of them return no rows. And so we end up with 53 CSV files, even though there was 787 statements run. So the insert is currently much faster. Okay. So that's it for copying the PG data. Configure selective sync. We need to do it in both cells, but I don't remember if I do it on the source cell. It doesn't look like it. That is something that we're going to need to do to make verification work, because the source cell, we want it to like only checksum the orgs that we select, because .com is too big. And we're going to have to do that much earlier in the process so that it finishes checksumming everything before we copy the data across. Enable view nodes. Okay, so then really that's it for dereplication. And then the last thing is checking replication. So GDK org replication status calls this one, and it prints the status, calls replication complete, which currently I disable checking verification. So we have replication complete without verification. It goes enumerates through the replication enabled replicator classes and checks that replication's 100. I almost forgot to mention the changes in the GitLab Rails branch that corresponds to the GDK branch that I have for the POC. There are a lot of files changed, but essentially what I've done is introduce the idea of a site can be an org migration target, which is different from a geo-primary site or a geo-secondary site, or even a regular non-geo site. And the way that like the code knows like that it's an org migration target is just at the moment it just checks that the feature flag is turned on. It's like feature flag, org migration target, something like that, cell, and org migration target cell. So if you turn it on in a particular cell, then that cell, the main difference is it will run certain geo replication and verification jobs, like cron jobs. It will run the geo log cursor, which will process geo events and queue sync jobs, basically. And then there's a lot of random places in the code that check, like, is this a geosecondary? Okay, so this scheduler worker should or should not run based on that. Well, now we need to know, like, okay, is it a secondary or an org migration target? And like in this case, the repository check worker, it needs to know, like, if it's a secondary site, then this shard that's supposed to be worked on is a like it shouldn't be worked on because it's a secondary site. But I changed it here to take project ID and say, like, oh, is this project being replicated to this site? Because in the context of org migration target, some projects will be replicas and some projects will not. So there's replica project ID, there's replica namespace ID, and replica org ID methods where we can check something like that. So yeah, there's a lot of places, a lot of different files that need to change where they were just checking geosecondary before. Yeah, is this an org migration target? Well, just check if the feature flag is enabled. Because feature flags are independent. They're cell local, right? So the legacy cell won't have this feature flag enabled while the protocell will. Here's the most of that implementation inside of EElib GitLab Geo. So that's it for the walkthrough of org migration install POC. Thank you.